Okay, here we go. I can show them how to do it when I'm in the zone. Before we start, let me puff that indigo. If I thrust, guaranteed you gon' feel it though. My intro for this real shit. When I walk the bridge and we built it. Two hoes got the boy on.
What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Dead on Dave. Welcome back to the channel. We got a brand new thing for you all. Welcome to the very first episode of Running the Ropes with my good buddy Jesse J. What's going on, bud?
Hey, man. Glad to be here.
That sounded bad.
Go fuck yourself. I'm in pain, huh?
Dave's not here, man. This is Running the Ropes. This is our brand new show between Jesse and I. We are doing... Basically, this is just us breaking down the most incredible moments in wrestling history. We're going to go through them one at a time until we break them down, make fun of them, tear them back up, see what's bullshit, see what's not, and absolutely come to a complete understanding on what it means for the business. And, what better way to start with than one of the most controversial moments in wrestling history, you know? And for those of you watching here on Dead on Dave Productions and those of you watching on Joe Cronin Show, make sure that you're checking out both channels, not only Joe Cronin Show, but Dead on Dave Productions as well. Sub to both, like both, and all will be harmonious within the world.
What's that?
You're
gonna be seeing a lot more of these collaboration videos.
Yeah, we're gonna be collabo, baby. We're in the music industry, but we're starting with a bang because let's face it, one of the most talked about, even 20 years later, almost 20 years later, one of the most talked about, influential, important moments in wrestling history was the Montreal Screwjob. We're talking November 9th, 1997, Molson Coliseum, the Molson Center, I should say, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. This is a moment in time that changed wrestling in so many ways, and it's so polarizing. And so I thought this was a perfect one, considering especially it's you and me doing this, who I'm either the brightest person talking about wrestling this summer, or I'm a fat idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about, and Jesse, of course, drinks unicorn blood. So this is a perfect one to to start with.
Yeah, Canadians.
Does that mean we got to say A more during the show? Do we got to say A a lot? Does it happen in Montreal?
Not a chance.
No,
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay, fair enough. So let's get right into it. Let's not.
I got a question for you. Like, when do you think that this whole? When did this whole thing start? Was it when the feud with Michaels and Brett started, or could you say it started all the way back in '96 at like WrestleMania?
See, I think that's where it all depends on which side of this argument you fall on. There's people who are completely on Bret Hart's camp, and they're going to say, this started because of, the power and the stroke that was building in the back with the Click and all of this stuff, and Bret Hart was kind of being faded out to obscurity and all of these things. If you're in more of the Vince McMahon point of view, this was purely a business play and nothing more. And of course, if you're Shawn Michaels and Triple H's camp, you're like, well, the asshole wouldn't play ball. So we play ball for him. And there's just a lot of different ways to look at it. But I think it did actually start at WrestleMania. Now,
I think that they had an okay relationship at that point, but
you could see when Brett left after that match. Now, whether that was a work or not, you could add. I'm talking WrestleMania, when he left the ring, gave that belt to Shawn Michaels, he looked genuinely upset.
According to him, it was a work, so everybody would think there was more heat between them so that they could keep having matches. I don't know how true that is. But
I don't know how that seems disingenuous to me. I don't know though.
I think he was actually pissed because, according to him as well, he didn't like that they were going with Shawn. He felt like he was an interim champion.
Yeah. It's exactly what it was for him, for his outlook. But as we know, Bret Hart has certain ways of looking at things that the rest of the world doesn't always see. But this is the thing about the Montreal Screwjob that's so damn interesting. So many years later, so many people still talk about it because there's inconsistencies in the story. Everybody who's written books that's been involved with it all say different things. No wonder why people think this was a work. And that's something that we're going to really get to the heart of. That's the first question I want to ask you. Do you, as a lifelong wrestling fan, as a guy who watches probably more Attitude Era stuff than anyone I know, do you think that the Montreal Screwjob was a work? Do you think it's the biggest hoax in wrestling history?
I don't. I think that they capitalized on it though.
Yeah, they definitely
It
capitalized
was
on
real. I think it was 100%. I think it was very real. But and then I think they figured out what they were doing later, and they for 20 years they've been making money on it.
it. Yeah, I'm not a conspiracy guy when it comes to this stuff, but there's a lot of compelling things to make me think that this may have been the greatest hoax in history.
I do think them making a Bret Hart movie at the same time was a little funny.
And
but
that's the first thing I wanted to talk about is Wrestling with Shadows. How friggin' coincidental is that? I mean, you could believe in coincidence or you can believe in providence. And this seems to me to be tended towards the latter. It seems like this had something to do, like they knew something big was going to happen. It's incredible to me. And you know, something else that doesn't make a lot of sense. They show every confrontation that Bret Hart has, even with his own wife at one point, and his wife and Triple H. They show all these confrontations. But the one thing they don't show is Bret Hart's and Vince McMahon's confrontation, the alleged punch shot.
They show Vince coming out after being hit, but they don't show the actual confrontation. But I could see at that point, I would think cameras get the fuck out of here kind of thing.
Oh, by the way, just so you guys know, I see that people are already trying to call in. I am going to take calls on this, but it's after Jesse and I break stuff down. So go ahead and just hang tight. We will take your calls, and I will be asking for calls to get your opinion on the Montreal Screwjob. Remember, this is about the Montreal Screwjob. It's the only thing we're going to be answering questions about, so keep that in mind.
Dave, don't you think that after this happened, they would have been like, let's say it was real. Vince would have been like, hey, no fucking cameras in here. Stay out. We're hashing this out.
Yeah, I mean, very possible. But at the same time, if it's not real, if it is a work, they kick the cameras out to make it look real, and then they can spin whatever yarn they want. The punch sold the story so much more than anything else. Here's the reasons why I can see why people think that it's a work. I don't think it's a work either, by the way. But I can come to the conclusion. I can at least see the people's sides. One, everybody benefited from this story. Everybody. Bret got paid. He got paid a hell of a lot of money by WCW, and to really not have to do too much, as it turned out, because his career was basically over once he left WWE.
He kicked me in the head.
I told him, "Don't hurt me," and he goes out there. And he kicked me in the head and hurt me. I told him not to hurt me.
He kicked him in the fucking temple. He could have killed him.
Dome. He could have killed him. Yeah, it was Goldberg, man. Goldberg's the greatest of all time. Don't talk about Goldberg like that. No, he's reckless. He almost killed Bret Hart. I told him don't hurt me, but he hurt me. It's unfortunate. But I touched on it earlier that everybody had a different, and I'm talking about the people who were in the event. They all had a different perception of it. Check this out. Vince Russo wrote a book, Forgiven. He claims that he gave the entire finish to Vince McMahon. Shawn Michaels, in his own book, Heartbreak and Triumph, states that he and Triple H came up with that spot and gave it to Vince. Bret, in his own book, goes on to say that he found out that Jerry Briscoe came up with the whole thing. Then there's further discrepancy. Shawn Michaels having stated he told Earl Hebner that what was going to happen. Earl, to this day, has stated that Jerry told him what was happening. Then there's conflicting reports whether road agent Pat Patterson was or not in on the screw job. Depending on
tell you, Vince, the people gonna go banana.
I tell you, Vince, everybody's gonna go crazy for this, Vince.
I love that guy.
I love Pat Patterson.
But no, what you just did, like, not one story fucking matched up.
No, nothing matches, and it's all documented in different people's books. Now, granted, some of them came out at different times, and I think a lot of people, for most, it got put to bed for real in, was it 2011 or 2012, when Bret and Shawn sat next to each other and did that unbelievable interview.
I didn't do any of the research I said I was going to do for this, but I did watch that. I watched that only.
Yeah, the Rivalry series, which was amazing.
That was one of the, to be honest with you, I got into wrestling at like 98, the Highway to Hell, actually.
Okay.
So therefore, this entire stuff, I didn't see this when it happened. And my first introduction to the Montreal Screwjob was actually that Shawn and Bret sit down. Yeah. And that is one of the best WWE produced fucking ever done.
It really is.
Just so good.
It's just so
Jesus.
much of this doesn't make sense though. Why was Vince down there? Why was Vince at ringside at all? That's one of
Well,
my
wait. Well,
that's one of my biggest
well,
questions. Why was he there?
because okay, because he. Well, I mean, God, if the whole thing was like it said, then he wanted to make sure it went down like it was supposed to.
Yeah,
But
I
then
guess. I mean, but isn't that a tip off to Brett? Isn't it? I mean, if right now we know that there are certain guys, if they come down to the ring, if Triple H were to walk down to the aisle during the middle of a match, don't we know something's going to happen? Now, granted,
Well,
at the time, Vince
yeah.
was not a full on, even real character yet. You know, I mean,
No, not at all.
but
It
still,
was this that start. But I mean, you got to think if him and Brett they were having these discussions. Brett hadn't given him an answer yet because at the end of the day, if this is all true, that's really what forced everyone's hand was Brett didn't want to play and do what he had to do.
he didn't want to drop
So
the belt there because he was saying he wanted to make an uncontracted appearance the next night and drop
and
the belt.
drop it, yeah, like a pussy.
Which
you
I
know?
don't believe, by the way. There's not many things that I'll say I do not believe Bret Hart on, but I don't believe that statement. I do believe he would have taken that belt to WCW. I really do.
Ooh,
I know that's controversial. I know that, but I believe it. I just the way everything was going, the hatred. Now this is me.
God.
This is me buying into it being 100% real with all the
Okay.
emotions. That's the way it made me feel because of how everybody was reacting to that event.
I'd like to think he had more integrity than that, though.
Yeah,
you know?
maybe. I mean,
Or more
maybe.
class. I mean, even if he did 100 other fucking things, I'd like to think like that's something he wouldn't have done. But maybe, I don't know.
And there's so many different ways that it could have been handled, but at the end of the day, I don't blame Triple H and Shawn Michaels for taking part in it because let's face it, something had to happen, something had to give. And
Oh yeah. That's where I'm with Vince on this whole deal. Like you forced his hand, you wouldn't give him any. According to the story, there was several compromises given to Brett, and he wouldn't take a damn one of them. Yeah. According to the story.
Yeah, according to the story, yes. Which version? That's a really good question.
Yeah. They all seem to say that Brett was, he was very firm in what he wanted to do. That's what they all do seem to be along those lines. So I don't know.
No, I think that's probably the most accurate thing is Brett was being Brett 100%, and he was. He wasn't going into business for himself or any of that crazy stuff, but he was, very much set in his opinion, set in his ways, and how he was going.
Oh, do you think do you think the Attitude Era, which it wasn't called yet, but do you think that whole, getting rougher and more edgy was really bothered him? I know he said it did, but I mean, I think he was getting phased out. He was the superhero Cena type character, and that was no longer being the thing. He was probably saving his spot, maybe.
I think that's a very good possibility. The times were changing, but at the same time, how can you ask that question knowing he was going to WCW, where it was already well past any of that stuff that Brett was used to in 94, 95, 96. I mean,
True. So yeah, I mean, he was really taking the money. What he thought it wasn't going to be edgy over there. I mean,
no, I mean that's the thing. In '98, in '97, or I should say, in '97, it was already full on friggin' edge mode in WCW.
Yeah, and they were still getting rid of the hokey stuff in WWF at that time. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting.
It's an interesting. The whole damn story is interesting. Let's kind of back up and talk about why it happened, or at least how it started to. Brett re-signed a massive deal with WWE. Massive deal. He was gonna. I think it was either 3 or 6 or 10 years. It was like a huge deal. And WWF was getting their asses kicked at the time, and Vince came to the conclusion that he could not afford that contract. So this is the story Vince tells. So Vince goes on and says, hey, Brett, if you can still get that deal WCW was originally offering you, because that's what pushed Vince's hand to pay Brett the money that he was anyway. If you could still get that deal, go get it, make the call. And then it's really the reaction to that conversation that kind of started everything. Because Brett was like, it seemed the way Brett was telling it, especially on Wrestling with Shadows, he was kind of taken aback by that request. He was like, well, okay. And then it just kind of steamrolled from there. And then it became about the belt and if he's going to drop the belt and how should he drop the belt and all of this stuff. And it was just it was quite crazy.
It was one of the most real times that we had. I think even throughout the whole Attitude Era, nothing was as real as that.
Yeah. Well, you look at the immediate aftermath of what happened. Bret Hart losing the match, losing in quotations. I know we're not on video, so you can't see me do finger quotes.
Oh, the end of the fucking Survivor Series was great. They literally just went off.
Yeah.
It just was done.
Shawn Michaels goes off. Shawn should have got a fucking acting job or a award for the way he reacted. It was great. He was pissed off. He was yelling at Vince. He grabs his belt and runs away.
Okay, I just wanted to bring this point up. This was said in a video, I think, that, Shawn could have been stabbed, he could have been whatever. Yeah. And, in a way, that's true. So, you know what? Regardless of if this was a work or not, if it was a work, it was still a risky fucking work because they were in Canada, nobody knew.
Lynched. Yeah.
They could have fucking done anything at that time. That's pretty crazy. That's ballsy at the end of the day.
I don't think that Vince thought it was going to be as crazy as it turned out to be. And that's part of the reason why I come to the sanity of thinking there's no way this was a work. Because Bret going on the tirade that he goes on, the loogie heard round the world.
Oh, that was the best.
It was. The WCW motion, which I think probably helped calm the crowd down, to be honest, because he was letting everybody know his intentions.
I didn't see the WCW deal. I missed that.
In the air, he writes the words WCW with his hand.
Oh, maybe I saw it, didn't realize that's what he was doing.
Yeah, he writes big WCW with his hands. Man. And then he goes out and even takes it further by absolutely destroying the announcers area, the tables, the equipment. He nexused the whole frickin' area. And it was wonderful.
You can't fake. I mean, you can fake that shit, but but Bret Hart can't. That's the thing, Bret. That was. I mean, he was good in the ring and all, but I don't think he could have faked that kind of emotion.
No, very true. Very true.
God give him all the credit he's due. I don't think he could have faked that. And especially since he wouldn't have, because he was supposed to be babyface for the kids and all. He wouldn't have went to that route. Even being the heel they were having him be, he wouldn't have done all that shit. No, so he was really pissed.
He was livid. He was livid. So the emotions seem to back up the fact that this is 100% real. What doesn't help the fact is Jerry Lawler is one of the people who's been on record being quoted as saying that he thought it was a work. Kevin Nash has stated that he's been told by people within that event that it was a work. Same thing with X-Pac. There's been plenty of people that have good knowledge of the event who said it's the biggest sham in history.
Yeah, but I guess that's a good way, though, also, to not that they all sat around and said, this is what we're going to say, but it's a good way to keep it alive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And especially because, let's face it, it's probably the most important moment in history because it's when the industry changed. It's when the industry changed because for anything else, it gave birth to one thing. And that's the greatest villain in the history of the wrestling industry. Because that is the night that Mr. McMahon was born.
It's funny because it depends on who you're asking. Some people would say that nobody, even Stone Cold, nobody was as big as Hulk Hogan and shit. And I wasn't alive then. So, but I will say that you do hear that Stone Cold blew everyone away in all the sales. I mean, I would like to think he got bigger ratings too, just because I thought that the Attitude Era made wrestling so mainstream beyond what Hulk Hogan did. Maybe I'm wrong, but what do you think of that? I'm just curious.
As far as the biggest name or the biggest,
well, not just the biggest. Like you said, this is like one of the most important times in wrestling. You could
that event is yes. I think it's the moment that 2 years before or a year and a half before. The wrestling industry was shaken to its core because of the formation of the NWO. But that didn't change the industry. That was a faction, and in fact, it was a faction that we have seen before in another organization, New Japan. We've seen that happen. It didn't change anything. It shook the core and allowed an industry to get back into the running. But what happened with the Montreal Screwjob, that's unprecedented. That's never happened before.
All right. Good point. Well, I mean, okay, so what about say the Mr. T, Cyndi Lauper, the 1985, WrestleMania, the whole deal? Had that happened yet? Had they gotten that kind of exposure yet with all the major stars and something like WrestleMania was pretty big too. So these were
wrestling thing, yeah. I mean,
so those two events were probably two of the biggest things to have happened to this date.
Yeah,
right?
We'll see. they're big events for different. Well, actually, for the kind of the same reasons. Because in
That's
the
why
80s,
I'm kind of lock them together. Yeah.
yeah, in the 80s, you had wrestling industry which was suffering. It was going through a time of transition, but it was more because of the state of technology. Cable companies were becoming a little bit normal, and the indie scenes, the territories weren't able to make the same transitions, and so there had to be a big event to kind of culminate everything. And WrestleMania became that thing, and Rock and Wrestling was born because of it, and all of these things, and it became a pop culture phenomenon and all this. In the 90s, wrestling was suffering. WWF was, the industry wasn't suffering. WWE was suffering. That WWF was suffering in 1996, 1997. They were getting buried by WCW. So an event of this magnitude changed the fortunes of everybody. It essentially, let's look at what it did. It essentially ended the career of Bret Hart, because he didn't do much in WCW, and he probably would never have gotten hurt had he stayed in WWF. It gave WCW the reckless, arrogant fucking narcissism that allowed them to continue to make the mistakes, and one of them misusing Bret Hart when they got him, that led to their downfall. 3, it gave WWF the instant pop and controversy that it needed to get slung right into the spotlight. And 4, it gave the wrestling industry the most hated and most villainous personality in history that would go on to formulate one of the greatest duos with another wrestler that would transcend wrestling, and I'm talking McMahon Austin. We got all of that from this one night. That's why, for me, I call it the biggest night in the history of the business.
Sorry, I was plugging and I was on mute, but I heard everything, man. I see, that's why you're good at this shit, dude. That was an amazing fucking rant right there. Well, not even a rant. It was you laid out some knowledge right now. That was killer. That was
sounded
great.
Good.
Fuck yeah, dude. I was just like, I couldn't even live it. I was like, I'm going on mute. I can't interrupt this even with typing. Like, this is great. Good
I want to
shit.
take a quick moment to digress from this. I'm going to get your response to that in a moment. But make sure right after not right after this, I'm sorry, at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, make sure you go check out my boy Tommy C. He'll be live on Shot from the Point, and he'll be doing some more of that amazing NHL hits video game action, and be taking your calls about the new 3-on-3 rule within the NHL. Yes, a rule change has happened within the NHL. Overtime periods. There'll be a 5-minute overtime period with 3-on-3 rules. Tommy C is going to break that down for you, all whilst playing video games. NHL hits. Make sure you check that out. It's going to be awesome. 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Shot from the Point. Make sure you check that out. So, yeah, Jesse, what's your response to all of that craziness that I just threw out there?
To be honest, I wouldn't even be able to say back 2 out of the 4, but I agree with all that. I mean, I wasn't a big, even now, I can kind of go back and watch it, but I never liked WCW. See, when I first saw, when I think of wrestling, like, if it wasn't for the Attitude Era, I wouldn't be here now, because even like Bret Hart, I wouldn't have liked anything like, because the way, not because he was in pink, but I didn't like that colorful, like WCW. I didn't like the yellow turnbuckles and the blue ring, and it just looked fake. It looked gimmicky. It looked like superhero shit. Nothing that would appeal to me. Bring in the Attitude Era. That's why I got into it. It was like, oh shit, they're fucking hitting each other with fucking weapons. This is great.
In WCW, the black the ring changed to a more darker tone. Everything was more
And even then, though, I didn't like it, because I didn't like the way everything. I didn't like their stage. I didn't like
I was very much a WCW guy. I loved it. I grew up on Crockett Cup and the NWA, which the roots carried right into WCW. That's what I was brought into wrestling on.
Yeah,
and I loved the history of it. And there's not too many bigger Ric Flair fans in the world than I am. I love me some Ric Flair. Because he was insane. Because he would take his pants off sometimes.
That guy would get you so drunk.
Oh yeah. Oh god.
But I wouldn't pay with the tab, brother.
Woo! That probably has not paid for a drink in the last 30 years. Because any bar he goes into, somebody wants to buy Ric Flair a drink. To this day, right now, somebody wants to buy Ric Flair a drink. Guaranteed. Yeah, it really is an incredible event, and there's so many different ways of looking at it and breaking it down, and it's what do you think that night represented?
Well, you could say changed. I'm trying to think of a better. Um, you could say a couple things. You could say change in the business, and you can say, I want to pick the right word here. Maybe you can help me. It was really Vince securing his company
Yeah.
and showing, you don't who's boss. Who he was gonna. You don't fucking just think you're gonna run the company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's a really good point. That's a really good point because by a lot of people do say that Bret Hart had a hell of a lot. In fact, some people go as far to say that Bret Hart had in his contract that he had majority creative control over, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people think that this was fake.
I've never heard that. That's
I
interesting.
I read that
Makes sense.
today. I read that today, as a matter of fact.
That makes sense, though. I mean, it sounds like, but you see, it's funny. That must have been after Hogan left, because Hogan would have had more control than him
Yeah.
up until. I think that's even what happened with WrestleMania 9, if I'm not mistaken. But that's crazy. So you would say there's credence to that. Like Vince had to take back his company basically from if anyone else was thinking, hey, I'm going to do what Bret Hart did, or even worse.
Well, another part of that though is a lot of people that were in the industry in WWF at the time talked about how the Clique was really running things.
Oh yeah,
The Clique had so much power.
But they were Vince's boys though, so I mean, in a
Vince's
way,
boys, yeah. So really, I do feel that this was it was a gamble by Vince, because let's face it, if Shawn Michaels doesn't get hurt at the Royal Rumble just a few months later, fortunes change again, because we don't know what happens between, at least going forward, between Austin and Shawn Michaels. You don't figure that rivalry just ends after WrestleMania. What happens to Shawn Michaels after that? We don't get the amazing friggin' promo by Triple H the next night, rebuilding DX, bringing in the Outlaws, bringing in X-Pac. We don't get all of those things. It's just, and it all stems from Vince taking that.
Oh, you're saying, okay, you were losing me. So you're saying we don't get all those things if this didn't happen,
If
basically.
Vince doesn't take that chance on that night, if he does not decide November 9th, 1997, he is going to screw over one of the biggest stars he's ever had.
Yeah. Could you imagine if they did, let's say, what Brett asked and said, and like they just did some chicken shit thing the next night?
Yeah.
Where he hands down I mean, I guess it wouldn't have shaken anything, but that's the point. Nothing would have changed.
Exactly. Change sometimes need a catalyst. Change sometimes needs an absolute reaction to create that change. And that's what we got that night. We got catalyst. We got chaos.
Looking back, I would hope if I was Brett or any of these guys involved, especially Brett, I'd be thankful for it, because you were part of something that was ever change a business forever. And not just that, take that away, and just that incident is just going to be talked about for a long time. So I think it's worth it. Seemingly at the time, it looked like the end of the world for him. The end of his career, maybe just bad things all around. But it was good as a whole for everybody.
It took on its own legend. It became its own entity. Yeah. And it's something that kind of has become bigger than the industry in a lot of ways, because everybody has an opinion on it, and they're all differing. And we're talking about this 20 years later, and we're talking about it in not just like, ooh, it changed the next night. No, we're talking in how it changed the foundation of wrestling. And it really changed the fortunes for everybody. And really, the only losers from this is WCW, because they were given, even though it could be seen as that it was a gift that Bret Hart was going to them, they got a burnt out Bret Hart because of this situation. They got a bitter Bret Hart because of the Montreal Screwjob. They got a Bret Hart who maybe was a little bit wary of authority because of what happened to him on that night in Montreal. Who knows if he's not jaded for the rest of his life, because if that was 100% legitimate, what does that do to you if you're Bret Hart? If you're the biggest star in the business and your boss, your friend, your mentor, somebody who knew your father would screw you over in your country, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, what does that do to your psyche? Does that change you? It has to. It can't just mean nothing. That has to be soul-shattering. it just maybe I'm going deeper than it needs to be.
Well, it's okay. That's what this is for.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm ranting and raving. I'm being a psychopath, but that's okay. I'll do it any way I want.
Oh my god, I'm sure that there's some people that fucking thinking this. The wrestling fans are insane.
Oh,
They
yeah.
sit there and analyze this shit anyway. So that's why you're watching this show.
Exactly. Let's go ahead and open up to a couple calls. Let's see if anybody wants to call in and talk about this amazing event. Get your opinions.
I do got one. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. While we're waiting for your phone calls, Jesse, go ahead.
I just remembered a question I had for you. They brought this Bret and Sean sit down like 2011, 2012, and I know Bret Hart came back in like 2010 to do WrestleMania, if I'm not mistaken. When did he make good with everyone? I'm trying to think. Why did they start this up again 12 years later?
I think money. I think
well, sure,
money has a lot
but
to do with
I
it.
mean, when did he actually make good with Vince again? Because I know he was in the Hall of Fame in like 2006.
Yeah.
Some shit. No, that's not right, is it?
No, it had to be later than that.
Because I know Stone Cold went in 2009. Maybe it was 2006. I think it was because I have the DVD.
Let me click on Bret Hart's name here. Hold on.
Unless he was doing Stu. He might have been doing Stu. It was when he told the Stu Owen joke.
Yeah.
Damn it, the Owen, he got me.
Will Fuller, you are live with Dave and Jesse. Let's get your thoughts on the Montreal Screwjob, shall we?
Yeah. Hey Jesse. Hey Dave. Montreal Screwjob. What's incredible about it is there's so many aspects surrounding it that you could analyze it, and there's a reason there's been documentaries and books and countless interviews on it. It is the most controversial, bar Chris Benoit. It is the most controversial moment surrounding the wrestling industry.
I love that.
Yeah, but see, the difference is that this was an in-ring thing. Chris Benoit was an in-house thing. So yeah, it's,
he did make him tap.
Oh God. Oh God.
German suplex.
Oh God. Oh God. No.
Well, this is going on so it'll work over there.
Yeah, right.
People can misinterpret it. It can be interpreted in a different way.
Yeah.
People find it offensive.
Well, everybody has. That's the thing. I'm gonna let that go and not create a firestorm of things.
You don't want to kick me like Joe last night.
I'm not gonna let you hijack the show.
That's all.
But I did watch it. I did watch it again. Yeah, my God. The thing is, I'm kind of I've listened to interviews from Jim Cornette, but you can't really trust Jim Cornette on anything. No, you can't trust him.
You can be entertained by him.
Yeah, it was a clusterfuck of clusterfucks. Yeah,
he's right about that. It certainly was. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and Jim Ross has done interviews on it. He didn't know. I think Jim Ross didn't know if it was a work, and apparently there was a story that he was locked up in the office because they worried that he knew about it when he didn't. That's what I've heard.
I've heard things about that they were worried that he would let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But then you hear that the only people who knew about it was Sean, Hunter, and Vince. But then that gets contradicted because
was Hunter that significant at the time?
Hunter was right there. Hunter was the kind of guy in Sean's ear, at that time, saying, if he's Hunter's on record of saying it, if that son of a bitch doesn't want to play ball, we'll play ball for him. He said that line.
They even put it in the video game.
By the way, Bret Hart went into the Hall of Fame, it looks like in 2007.
I think it was 2006. I think
because it was 2006. Son of a
August
bitch.
9, 2007 is what I'm looking
Okay,
at.
well then who went in 2006?
2006.
Yeah,
Dusty Rhodes was in 07. Dusty Rhodes.
Somebody posted a video that confused me.
You know what's crazy? Yeah, fucking that. Yeah, okay. Thank God. I was gonna say I'm losing it.
The thing is that what I feel about it's very difficult to say if it was a work and if it wasn't a work because there's been interviews that Bret didn't know he was going to drop the belt, or Bret thought that he was going to drop the belt in Detroit the next night on Monday Night Raw. But I don't want to quote, but like Vince McMahon at the time, WWE needed like a lethal dose of poison. They needed to shatter it in order to revamp WWF at the time to make the Attitude Era begin. Because I think a couple of weeks later, didn't Stone Cold attack Vince McMahon?
No, that didn't happen a couple weeks later.
No, it did. But this just he
How
was
about Madison
moving
Square
on from
Garden?
Brett, and Vince was already starting to realize like Brett is the afterthought now. He's not
Yeah.
gonna be my seller. And Brett knew that. So Brett already was like, I'm gonna be worth less here, whether I stay or go. So it was just a tough thing.
Well, you got to remember something too. It's really important to remember that WWF, and I got to reiterate this, they were getting their asses handed to them.
Yep.
So a change had to happen in Vince's mind. That's why he could not afford that contract he signed Brett to. He signed Brett to a huge contract and knew,
The end of the Superman.
yeah, and he knew that if he kept Brett under that contract, it was going to bury his company. So he had to make a change.
What I found mostly, one of the things that I don't know if people comment on this, but back in the 90s, this was all before the Austin McMahon rivalry, as Vince is the on-screen boss. Vince was never really on screen. He was a commentator.
Yes.
But he wasn't an on-screen. He wasn't going out to the ring.
No, they still had
heel.
Tunney. They still had Monsoon. They still had things like that. They weren't.
But Vince wasn't there.
No.
And then that was the first time. I think that was one of the first times we saw Vince come out to the ring during the Montreal Screwjob.
It was one of the first times, I think. But I also want to say that I remember prior to that there were times where Vince had made reference to the fact that he or somebody made reference that he was the owner of the WWF. I'm not sure on that, but I want to say that it was mentioned at one point or another because he was getting away from his announcer duties prior to the Montreal Screwjob. So, but it was still weird and bizarre for him and his entourage to come out to the ring. And the funny thing is, you can look at it, him coming down to the ring, either supporting or supporting either one of the theories, that it was a work or that it was real, because it kind of makes sense either way. Either he was going down there to sell the whole storyline if it was a work, or he was going down there to make sure that the business that he was putting in play went down.
Yeah. I can't. I don't know what to say now, because the thing what I think about the Montreal Screwjob is that I've kind of always been a guy that's kind of been slightly who's been slightly sympathetic to Bret Hart. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel WWE needed to change, but it was in Montreal, it was in Canada. Bret Hart was going to leave the company. He'd been a great servant to the company, and they do that to him. And I feel, and that was his last proper match in the company. I don't want to talk about what happened like years later, because that ruined him.
Beat the hell out of Vince.
Another thing.
I'll buy the Hart family.
There are some people who even take it a little bit farther and say that it wasn't just a work that night, that the whole idea was to have Brett go in and kind of be the guy to take WCW down from the inside. I've heard people talk about that.
That's insane.
It is completely insane, because they didn't need Bret Hart's help to take them.
Bret's Hart.
Yeah.
Bret didn't have one.
All they needed.
Oh.
All they needed was continue to do the things that they were doing. Because let's face it, if we look at it subjectively, when Bret Hart goes to WCW, they're given a gift. They're given a guy who could still sell. People wanted to see, and he was coming off one of the hottest angles that anybody has ever seen. Everybody wanted to know what happened with the friggin' Montreal Screwjob. So he goes over to WCW, and what do they do? How do they bring him in? As a special guest referee in a Ric Flair match. What the fuck are they doing?
Woo!
Really? That's what they're gonna do?
I had 4 years left in me when he kicked me in the temple, and he ruined me. He tried to kill me.
Boys, one at a time.
I'll fucking turnbuckle you. No.
It's pretty crazy.
Wait. When was this done? I didn't see this.
What do you mean? When was what done?
The Ric Flair did. What did you guys say?
When he came into the to WCW, which was like December or January, a few months later.
Yes.
He was brought in as a special guest referee between, I want to say it was definitely Ric Flair, but I want to say it was Ric Flair and Kurt Hennig, because he was being teased by Eric Bischoff as the newest member of the NWO.
Okay.
and he wasn't. Well, he wasn't, at least not then. And it just kind of went back and forth. It was just very bizarre. They
The
didn't use
only
him
time
properly.
one of the only things I ever saw of him in WCW when it happened was, and it was one of the only things I think he said he ever liked, was when Goldberg did the spear on him with that metal
The
plate.
metal plate, yeah.
I saw that, and I don't know. That was one of the only times I ever watched WCW that night.
They could have been doing stuff like that. They could have been doing stuff like that constantly. They could have had Bret Hart wrestling amazing matches with Chris Benoit.
Oh my god.
and
Yeah,
all
but they
these
do
things.
stuff like with the Warrior and well, wait. When you say doing stuff like that, what do you mean?
Like the referee situation, or focusing on stupid ass tired storylines with Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan, or the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, or
No.
What if
I
he
thought
came out? What if Bret Hart came out and just started shooting on WWF on WCW television?
Oh my god. Well, then there would have been lawsuits probably involved, but. But, man, that
you
would
can
have
take
been right up
shots, but you can't do, like, apparently you could take shots and you can give away the results to other people's organizations' events,
That's horrible.
but you can't go. That would be like if McDonald's went on a commercial and grabbed a Burger King burger and put a shit in between the buns and said, "This is what you're eating." You can't do it. You know.
But what's her name can take the title over there and toss it in the garbage.
Yes, she can. Which, by the way, that wasn't even the first time we've seen something like that. Does everybody forget Ric Flair not dumping the title in the belt, but showing the real World's Heavyweight title on WWF television? Does everyone forget that happening?
Oh no! I back in like '92, right? 90,
Yeah, when he first came in, the real world's champion, Ric Flair, holding that beautiful gold brick, because that was before he sent it back to WCW.
I figured that was all done business wise. Like they said, hey, we're gonna do this because it was still about sharing territories back then a little bit. Like,
There
hey,
was
we're gonna
no contact between WWF
None?
and WCW. No, because the whole reason why it happened is because Rick paid for that belt.
okay.
Rick paid for it, and
Okay.
WCW wanted the belt, and Rick said, "Give me 15 grand," and they said no, and he said, "Well, I'm not sending it back to you. I'll keep it, and I'm taking it on television," and that's how it happened.
Okay. See, I'm not as familiar with.
Give me tequila.
You got anything
And I
else,
actually-
Will, Mr. Fuller?
Yeah. The
Because
thing,
I'm
what I
gonna
feel
take
about,
another call. So.
yeah,
Yeah.
just quickly,
no.
the whole thing with the Montreal Screwjob, I feel like the influence of Shawn and Hunter really had a significant effect, because the whole, remember Bam Bam Bigelow? Didn't he main event Mania in '95?
Well, the Lawrence Taylor thing, yeah, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Clique went out their way to try and bury him.
I
So
I don't know what Bam Bam Bigelow has to
Well,
do with
wait.
the situation.
What do you? Why? Wait. What
because
do
the
you say
Clique
that
had
for?
such an influence on matters in WWF at the time.
Yeah, but this is 2 years later, and this is a different climate within
Yeah.
WWF. It's
I
a little
don't
weird.
think those are any correlation.
All right, I'm
Alright,
gonna
so,
go. See ya.
all right.
See ya, man.
Take it easy, Will.
Oh, was that your other buddy who was making? Okay.
Yeah, it was.
that was a-
Sayel, I hung up on you because you were having some kind of weird audio problems. And it
I was
sounded-
like, what the fuck's going on? What happened to your phone, Will?
yeah, it sounded like Sayel was taking the microphone and sticking it in his rectum, and that's not good.
I'm trying to get on the bus.
It's not best for business. It's not beast for business.
Yeah, so you know who's trying to call in? I think I saw Robert saying he was going to call in. So whoever wants to fucking call in, bring it on. Good
Yep.
points though.
Please hurry up and call in, because if not, we're going to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, 'cause I think we've almost. Yeah, exactly.
45 minutes.
Well, not even that. I think there's only so much you can bring up about it unless you have new intel or whatever.
Yeah. Unless there's an insider out there who has new things to shed light on things that we have yet to touch on. But yeah, bottom line is it was an amazing moment in time. It really did do what? Oh, it did some. I'm sorry, my wife. My wife made me laugh. I'm sorry.
Oh well, it was funny.
We'll never know for sure if it was real or fake. I'm going to go on and put my 2 cents in there and say that I believe that it was legitimate, based off the emotions involved.
I believe it was legitimate, and then everything that happened since years later, I think, is just totally trying to that's like the work part. They're trying to make as much off it as they can. They'll keep it alive and as long as they can. But at the very instant it happened, I think that was all real.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I think that. I think that's very fair. And to all the different questions of its legitimacy, it's kind of hard to judge some of the different accounts and such because we weren't there. How difficult of a situation must that have been to be around, let alone manage? Just absolutely toxic.
That's why Vince is the fucking boss, man.
Yep. Or at least he was. Now he's not showing up at Raw, so who knows?
They won't let me do what I want, damn it.
No, he wanted to be a Tough Enough, so he skipped Raw.
Oh, that's why we got all those muscle-bound jackasses.
Well, no, he still wrote Raw.
No, I understand that, but I mean, he's like, well, I'm gonna go where I have the most control.
That's right. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make sure that everybody is huge, down and tough enough. All right, they're all gonna be big guys, no little guys, no vanilla.
I didn't know Sergeant Slaughter took over WWE. No.
And that's in order.
You really do a good Sarge.
I don't do it as much anymore.
No, but just when you're trying to do Vince, you even sound like Sarge. So
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
think
terrible. But yeah, but that's only.
Well, but you could. I'm trying to tell you, fucker, you could pull off a fucking Sergeant Slaughter impersonation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And little Elvis.
Not as good as my Finkel though. I love my Finkel.
That was good. I like that.
Coming down the aisle.
Perfect.
I love Finkel.
That's fucking killer. He was the man, man. He really
I love
was.
Howard Finkel, absolutely.
God.
But
Even the way he used to say like mankind, do you remember mankind?
coming down the aisle, mankind.
He just had a way of doing it.
And he would always elongate the last couple of letters in the name. It was always kind of.
He made you remember who it was, and that's amazing.
Scheduled for one fall.
And he didn't do no fuck ups like Lillian, even though I like Lillian. She's been doing it a long time.
And it is for the WWF Championship.
Exactly. Damn, you're actually really good at doing that, guy. That's funny.
Because I love Howard Finkel. I just like all of his inflections that goes around in my head all the time.
Can you do him?
Wouldn't the world be
Go ahead.
more interesting if everything was announced by Howard Finkel? It would just be interesting.
Oh my God! Please buckle your seatbelts.
Buckle your seatbelt now. You are now free to move about the cabin. That would be great.
Yeah, it's fucking presidential election coming down the aisle.
And new President of the United States of America.
Okay, that was funny. He just I went a little bit feminine there.
I went a little feminine, but that's okay. Well, I think that we've about hit the Montreal Screwjob about as good as we can. We're definitely
Shit, man.
starting to
We
stray.
rate the shit out of it.
Yes, we did. I hope this was fun for you, Jess.
Oh man, I enjoy doing videos with you, man. It's a pleasure every time.
I'm glad you were able to join with me. Now we're going to give the audience, the viewers, a little bit of power here. If there's something you want to hear us talk about, if there's something you want to hear us get in depth about, go ahead and put it in the comment section below, or tweet me or tweet Joe on Twitter. You can tweet me at DeadOnDaveV and tweet Joe at Joe Cronin Show. And
Rick Bad Boy.
Let us know what you want us to break down next week, because this is a every Wednesday show right at this exact same time. We'll be live taking your calls on the greatest moments in wrestling history. Rick Bad Boy says it's a conspiracy. If you ask Tommy C, is that?
Yeah, that was great. That's just for you, Callahan.
Let me put on my tinfoil, Dick.
Oh,
But,
God.
there it is. So Montreal Screwjob. Also put in the comment section below whether you think it was a work, was it real, and where do you rank it as far as importance in the history of wrestling? So there we are. Jesse, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, anytime, man. Good times.
Good times. And make sure you check us out next time right here on not only Dead on Day Productions, but you could also be watching this on the Joe Cronin Show. So wherever you're watching it, make sure you check out the other channel, the Dead on Day Productions or Joe Cronin Show. Sub both channels. Have a good time.
And please do like and share this.
Like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And make sure you go check out Tommy C live at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as he plays NHL hits and takes your calls about the new NHL 3-on-3 rule change. Other than that, that's all I got.
He's going live right now, or what?
He'll be going live at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what I said.
Gotcha. 40 minutes.
40 minutes. That's how long you have. Go take a dump, eat a burger, and go watch Tommy C. Other than that, I think we're about out of here. We will see you next time. And remember, if you don't have talent, have talented friends. Peace.
Okay, here we go. I can show them how to do it when I'm in the zone. Before we start, let me puff that indigo. If I thrust, guaranteed you gon' feel it though. My intro for this real shit. When I walked the bridge and we built it. 2 hoes got the boy on kill clip. My team good and we rollin'. It ain't really hard to see that I'm fresher. I'm a F5 with Brock Lesnar. We ain't got time to listen. Yo, lecture. Let him put the title up and I get your bitch. Ask me, we ain't never made up. When the times got rough, we ain't never gave up. Boy, you next to the one like Morpheus. So the NLO can't fuck with us. That's real talk in this purple rain. Know some real dudes that'll bring the pain. Stay fresh, rock shades like Johnny.